Religion is man's attempt to be divine without God. Organized religion takes this futile attempt and institutionalizes it into a system of rituals, man-made ordinances, and false worship that inevitably leads to oppression, subjugation, and control. God hates religion, especially organized religion, because it always leads man away from him. God will judge organized religion once and for all during the tribulation, and we'll talk about how during this week's episode of Revelation Unveiled on Faith by Reason. Welcome to Faith by Reason, the website behind it all. As always, it's faithbyreason.net. There you will find hundreds of hours of study material, blogs, podcasts, and video. And we are taking a slight detour in our study of Revelation in the verse by verse aspect of it because we just left Revelation chapter 13 in our last episode. And so naturally we should go to Revelation chapter 14. However, we are going to temporarily skip over Revelation chapters 14, 15, and 16, which basically detail the wrath of God, the final judgment of God on this world and on the spiritual evil behind the powers of this world, and go instead to Revelation chapter 17 and chapter 18, because those chapters, specifically chapter 17 and to a degree chapter 18, because they occur right around the same time as the events of Revelation chapter 13, which is where we get to the midpoint of the tribulation, the abomination of desolation, the mark of the beast, where the world is forced to worship the Antichrist as God and take his mark. And since the bowls of wrath, which we see in Revelation chapters 15 and 16, occur towards the end of the tribulation, for narrative's sake, we're going to look at Revelation chapters 17 and 18 before that, because Revelation chapter 17 specifically, and again to a degree 18, really go over the end of organized religion and God's final judgment on organized religion, which again happens simultaneously with that 3.5 year point. So what is organized religion? What is religion? And why is it so deserving of God's judgment? Well, we've gone over this many, many times in the past. If you look in the right navigation bar on faithbyreason.net, you will see an entire category on both religion and organized religion, where I go over these things in vivid detail. But just briefly, I will go over what they mean and why they're deserving of judgment. As I said before, religion is man's attempt to be divine without God. Why would man want this? Why would man attempt this? Because it's in our DNA. It is how we are made up. It's how we were created. We were created for Eden. We were created for fellowship with God. Eden is perfect provision, perfect government, perfect security, perfect relationship with each other. And we attempt to do that falsely through our government. Man's government is Eden without God. And of course, we want Eden without God because of our rebellious nature. After the fall of man in Genesis chapter 3, we are no longer connected to God, and we have that rebellious spirit, which makes us, again, rebel against God and want what we want without him. But we were made for Eden. And so we still have the desires of Eden in our heart, but because we're rebellious, we want them without God, and that is what human government is all about. But in addition to having perfect government, we were also made for perfect fellowship with God, perfect worship with God. But again, since we are rebellious, we want that level of perfect worship and perfect fellowship with the divine, but we want it without God, and that's what religion is all about. Religion is us taking our own prideful aspects, our own prideful desires, and adding them to God's perfect will, and thereby corrupting it. The very first example of religion we see in Genesis chapter 3, the fall of humankind. What happens in Genesis chapter 3? We see the serpent, more accurately the Nakash, the shining one, attempting to tempt Eve. And what does he do? He asks Eve a question. He says, did God really say you can eat of all the trees of the garden? And Eve responds to the question by saying, yeah, we can eat of all the trees of the garden except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We can't eat of it, nor can we touch it, or we will surely die. That is the first religious statement. Why? Because Eve misrepresented what God said. God only said that Adam and Eve could not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He didn't say they couldn't touch it. Eve added that. Why did she add to it? Because she was trying to improve upon what God said. If you can't touch the fruit, then you certainly can't eat of it. So Eve believed, and probably Adam with her, that they made God's law, his ordinance, better. Hey, God, you said we can't eat it, but if we can't touch it, then we can't eat it either. So we made your law even better. Hey, God, look what we did. Yeah, that's pride, because you can't improve on what God does and says, because God is perfect. So when the Nahash, the serpent, Satan, saw that Eve was in religious pride, wanting to be like God, then he saw his opening and he said, oh, no. All you have, if you eat of the tree, you'll be like God. You'll get what you really want. And what you want is obviously to be like God. And if you eat of the fruit, you'll be like God. And of course, that all went down poorly. And, that's where original sin happened. But that was the first religious aspect. And again, it's based in pride, us trying to improve upon God, add on to what God says and make it better, which is an act of pride. You can't improve upon God. Good grief. That is the most prideful thing you can possibly think. Now, as I said, organized religion takes that concept and institutionalizes it and systematizes it. And the first time you see that is at Babel. We know about Babel with Nimrod and Semiramis. We've talked about it many, many times. If you want to get more information on that, again, go to the right navigation area and click on religion and organized religion, and you'll get a deep dive into that. But briefly, Babel was the first world empire led by Nimrod, who became a Nephilim. We've talked about Nimrod just in the last few episodes. He was a first world dictator. Semiramis was his wife / mother. Yuck. And Semiramis instituted the worship of Nimrod. She said Nimrod was the sun god. And when Nimrod died, she said he ascended to the sun. Later on, Semiramis becomes pregnant. And instead of admitting that she just got pregnant by some other guy, she says that this baby in her womb was actually the reincarnation of Nimrod. Nimrod reborn, the son, S-U-N, son of God, son and S-O-N and S-U-N, the son of God. And he would be, again, Nimrod reincarnated, basically corrupting the gospel in the stars. God wrote his gospel, his message of redemption in the stars long before the actual Torah and Tanakh, the Old Testament, was written, before any other works were written by the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Egyptians, all this stuff. The gospel in the stars was written before that. So when people say to you, oh, the Bible was written after these other ancient religions, so it's just copying them. No, it's not. The only way you can convince anyone of that is to say that any of these works of other religions were written before the stars were put in heavens. Nonsense. The first gospel was written in the stars. We talked about this before. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but the idea that man would be redeemed through the product of a virgin birth was already in the stars, and Semiramis used that in order to fake God's plan and create this false religion where Nimrod was the father god, the sun god. She was the mother goddess, the queen of heaven, the virgin mother, and Tammuz was the son of God who would die for mankind. She usurped this in order to get people to worship her and her son and the dead Nimrod. And she also had priests who were basically propagating this religion among the people of Babel. When God comes down and confuses the languages in Babel, 70 different nations were formed due to the confusion of languages. And priests went to each one of these 70 nations. They were part of those 70 nations, and they just took this false religion with them. And that's why you have the same mother-child cults all over the world. You see on the screen now all these different versions of the divine mother, the divine child, so forth and so on. In Egypt, they became Horus and Isis and Osiris. In Greek literature, Greek religions, they became Zeus and Aphrodite and Eros. In Roman paganism, they became Jupiter and Venus and Cupid, so forth and so on. And this was just altered throughout the years into all the false religions that we see today. And today, even in the dominant, quote unquote, Christian religion of Catholicism, which is the dominant, again, fake Christian religion. Sorry if that offends you, but it is what it is. I've done a ton of work on Catholicism. You can go into the sidebar on the right hand side and see that. It is the Virgin Mary who's worshipped. She's the same as the Queen of Heaven. She's basically Semiramis. And the baby Jesus and God, more or less, of Catholicism. It's all the same thing. It's all the same paganism. It's all the same false religion. And the priests of these false religions have always had their time at court. They've always been the advisors to the kings, the shamans, the soothsayers, the people who claim to have a connection to the gods. And what they would do is use that influence to shape the world. They would keep their so-called secrets to themselves, and they basically rule the world from the shadows, and that still happens to this day. To this day, you have secret cabals of people who run the world. Never mind who the president or the prime minister is of the world. The people who really run the world are these secret organizations who are the spiritual descendants of the priests of Semiramis. I call them mystics. Mystics have ruled the world since the days of Babel, and they rule the world to this day. And we have different names for them. Now they are the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg groups, the Council of 13, the Cecil Rhodes groups, the Rhodes Scholars. You have the Mariah Conquering Wind. You have the Illuminati, you name them, Skull and Bones. All of these different secret organizations, they are just the same. They're just a modern version of the same mystics who have been in power since the time of Semiramis. They run the world. They subject people to oppression and poverty. And they control the world. And it is time for them to finally be judged. They are the worst people on the planet. And God is finally going to judge them. All right, enough of the preamble. We're 12 minutes in. Let's get to the actual verses. Let's just go through Revelation chapter 17. And some of it we've covered already, but I'm going to still read the entire chapter. And we're going to basically cover the aspects that we didn't cover during the series on the Antichrist. Starting in Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. And there came one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials, and talked to me, saying, Come hither, and I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said to me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou saw was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And here is a mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And there are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue for a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And these have one mind, and they shall give their power and strength unto the beast. And these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff. We will get through it all in this episode, mostly because we've covered about half of this already. All the stuff about the beast that the woman is riding on, we covered during the series on the Antichrist. So we're going to really focus on this woman, who she is and what she represents. And I will tell you right now, this woman represents organized religion, all false religion. Actually, to say false religion is also, it's almost a redundant statement, because all religion is false. Because again, religion is man-made. It is not from God. The ordinances from God that you see throughout the Bible, in Leviticus and in the New Testament and elsewhere, there's not religion because it's from God. Religion is from man. God's ordinances are from God. So let's just be clear about that. Okay, let's break this down. And there came to me one of the seven angels which had the seven vials or seven bowls, and talked with me. So the bowls of wrath, which we'll get into after this series when we get back to Revelation chapters 15 and 16, the bowls of wrath are God's final judgment on the earth and on spiritual evil. So that couches this entire chapter in judgment. So this is all about judgment. He says, "Come hither, and I will show you unto you the judgment of the great whore that sits on many waters." So let's keep in mind that this is a vision. This is not to be taken literally. These things are symbolic. This whore, whatever she is, this harlot, is symbolic. Okay, I will show you the judgment of the great whore, a great harlot that sits on many waters. What is a harlot? Well, in the physical sense, a harlot is a prostitute. What is a prostitute? Well, we know what a prostitute is. A prostitute is someone who exchanges sexual intimacy for material value, usually money, but other things. Anytime you sell your sexual intimacy for some type of material value, that is harlotry. You are a prostitute. But spiritually, remember, we live in two worlds. We live in a spiritual world and we live in a material world. And we're talking spiritually here because this is a vision. Spiritually speaking, harlotry, prostitution, is when you give your spiritual intimacy in exchange for material goods. Anytime you worship any type of false god, any type of God, any god or any entity that is not the God of the Bible, and you do it in order to get stuff, houses, land, money, you are committing harlotry. So this whore, this harlot, is someone who represents worshiping something that is not the God of the Bible and for stuff, for material gain. And she sits upon many waters. We will see what the mystery of these waters are later. So let's keep going. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Okay, so we have the kings of the earth. These are the rulers of the earth. We're talking human rulers here. They've committed fornication. What is fornication? This is very important because I think most Christians have the wrong definition of fornication. Fornication, if you ask your average Christian, your average even Christian pastor, what is fornication? They will tell you that fornication is sex before marriage or sex outside of marriage. Wrong. That is not what fornication is according to the Bible. Fornication is not sex before marriage. Why is it not sex before marriage? Because there is no such thing as sex before marriage according to the Bible. Let me say that again. According to the Bible, there is no such thing as sex before marriage. Why? Because according to the Bible, according to God's ordinances, sex is marriage. The first person you had sex with, you married them, because having sex with someone seals the marriage covenant according to God. So again, the first person you had sex with, in God's eyes, you married them. Now, I know that may be horrific for you, depending on who the first person you had sex with. But again, in God's eyes, you married that person. And if you have sex with someone, if you both don't agree to absolving that marriage or dissolving it and divorcing that person, then the next person you have sex with, that's adultery. If you are married to someone, you have sex with them, and the next person you have sex with, you are committing adultery. Those are the only two aspects of physical sex that are just physical. When you have sex, you get married. That's it. The next person you have sex with, if you don't dissolve the marriage covenant, you are committing adultery. Fornication is not sex before marriage. Fornication is sex as a part of false worship. Don't believe me? Do a Google search do a Google search of fornication. Go to your favorite Bible software, your favorite Bible internet site. I use BibleGateway.com, and just do a word search on fornication. And every time you see fornication, has to do with sex done in a spiritual manner. These false gods, these idols, these various gods of the pagans had these temple prostitutes, and they had sexuality as a form of worship of these false gods. That's what fornication is. It is not sex before marriage. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but according to the Bible, that's not what it is. Fornication is sexual acts as part of worshiping any false deity, any other god other than the God of the Bible. So when it says the kings of the earth committed fornication with this woman, it is saying that the rulers of the world had sexual encounters in order as part of the false worship of this religious system. Okay, again, it's what it is. And it says they were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. What is it to be drunk? Now, I know those of you listening, if you're Christians, you're saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, you would never do anything as bad as getting drunk. But, I'm not as perfect as you. I have gotten drunk in the past. Yes, I went to college and I got drunk there. I've been drunk before in other periods of time after that. What does it mean to be drunk? It means you are reveling. You are taking pleasure. You are intoxicated. Your mind is completely in a different place. You are just having this revelry with it. So if you are drunk with fornication, that means not only are you having the sexual intercourse for the purpose of worshiping a false god, it means you are just in a dissolved mental state while you are doing it. You are just in some type of ecstasy, some type of rapturous experience. So that's what they're doing. They're not just doing it, they're loving it. If you're drunk, people are usually pretty happy. So that's what it is. They're drunk. They're just enjoying this fornication. They're enjoying and reveling in the fact that they are having some type of sexual encounter, a spiritual encounter with these false gods. Okay, verse 3. So he, the angel, carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. What does that mean? So he's carried away into the spirit because, again, this is a vision. This is not something that John is seeing literally. This is a vision full of symbols, and we'll go over what all the symbols mean. So the angel carried him into the wilderness. What is the significance of the wilderness? The wilderness is where sin resides. If you go back to some of the earlier episodes of Faith by Reason, where we talked about Satan and some of the spiritual aspects of him, there is, if you go to the book of Leviticus, there is the entity called the scapegoat. It's not an entity, it's actually a ritual for the scapegoat, where the Israelites were told that they would take two animals. They would take a lamb and a goat. The lamb was sacrificed for their sins. Then all of their sins were placed on this goat called the scapegoat, and that goat was sent out into the wilderness to an entity called Azazel. There's a good chance that Azazel is actually Satan, but it's sent out into the wilderness. The wilderness is not... Here in America, we think of wilderness as a forest or trees or places like that. In the Middle East, the wilderness is the desert. So the goat was sent out into the desert because that's where spiritual evil dwelt. That's where fallen angelic beings, fallen Elohim were. So going out into the wilderness means you are going out to false gods, these fallen Elohim, these fallen angels. So when it said he went out to the wilderness, in the mind of an Israelite, which the Apostle John was, he knows he was in the area of spiritual evil. So the angel carried him out to the wilderness, to the desert, to the area of spiritual evil. And there, in this area of spiritual evil, he saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So this scarlet-colored beast, we talked about this beast ad nauseum. This beast represents all the world empires, from Babel all the way to Rome, and Rome is the empire that has ruled the world from about the 2nd century BC all the way up to this day. The Roman Empire was never conquered. Don't let anyone tell you that the Roman Empire went away around the 3rd century. Nope, it did not go away. It just transformed. It went from being a dictatorship to a theocracy, the theocracy we know as Roman Catholicism. The popes became the Caesars. Constantine, who was the last Caesar of Rome, became Pontifex Maximus when he allegedly converted to Christianity, which he didn't actually do. He stayed being who he was, a pagan. He just absorbed Christianity because he thought that Christianity was the religious system in his mind that could unite the empire, because Christians were, very pious and faithful, and they were non-threatening. So he embraced Christianity. He called himself Pontifex Maximus, which is the same title that the Pope has to this day. He became the first Pope, not Peter. Peter was never a Pope. Constantine was the first Pope. So the Caesars became the popes, and the Roman Empire became the Holy See of Catholicism. That's who they are now. We talked about this in the past. I'll let you go back there and do the research yourself. A name's full of blasphemy. What is blasphemy? Blasphemy is calling anything God that is not God. So I'm guessing that these names of blasphemy are the names of all of these false entities that call themselves God but are not God. Baal, Molech, Ashtaroth, Zoroaster. All you name the false god that claims to be the God of the Bible or claims the authority of the God of the Bible, their name is written on this beast. Having 7 heads and 10 horns, we went over all what that means. The 7 heads represent the 7 empires of the world, and the 10 horns represent the 10 spiritual authorities. I'm not going to go into that. We've talked about it before. Go back to the last 3 or 4 episodes and you will get all of that information. Okay. Verse 4, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. Why is that important? Keep in mind the contemporary audience that John is speaking to. This is first century Israel. In the first century, Israel was ruled by Rome. Anyone who saw purple and scarlet colors, they knew what that meant. Purple and scarlet are the colors of royalty and of the priesthood. The Roman priests, all the priests of pagan Rome, wore scarlet. And to this day, the cardinals of Roman Catholicism, and again, Roman Catholicism is just basically pagan Rome with Christian names slapped on it. It's still paganism, but they just threw Christian names on it to make it seem like a Christianity. But of course, as now we've talked about that before. Go back to the series on the churches at Pergamum and the church at Thyatira, and you will get a full history on that. Don't have time to go into it now, but that's what Rome evolved into. So scarlet is the color of these Roman pagan priests. Purple is the color of royalty. The Caesars wore purple. The emperors of Rome wore purple. So purple and scarlet means that this woman is representing the temporal political power and the priesthood. Remember, when Jesus was crucified, the Roman soldiers who mocked him put a purple robe on him and said to him, they mocked him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Jesus claimed to be the King of the Jews, which of course he was. And these Roman soldiers mocked him by putting this purple robe on him. That purple robe is a robe of royalty. So this woman represents political power, and she represents spiritual power. And the precious stones and pearls are indicative of the amount of wealth that she has. Okay, continuing on. Having a golden cup in her hand, full of abomination and filthiness of her fornication. That golden cup is really important for a couple of reasons. First of all, that golden cup is indicative of Semiramis. Semiramis, it's always depicted in all of her various forms as having a golden cup in her hand, whether she is called Semiramis of Babel or Ashtaroth in the Middle East, or Ishtar, also in Persia and in Canaan. She always has a golden cup. So this woman represents Semiramis, the original, the first person who started false religion. And we'll see that again in the next verse. And also that golden cup represents the highest aspect of false Christianized paganism in Catholicism, and that is the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the perversion of what we call communion or the Last Supper, where Jesus breaks bread and says, "This is my body sacrificed for you," and he pours his disciples wine and says, "This is my blood poured out for you." The Eucharist perverts that into a sacrifice where Jesus is perpetually being sacrificed. Every time you ask your local Catholic priest, they will tell you that the Eucharist represents Jesus being sacrificed again and again and again, every single Mass, every single Sunday, over and over again, even though the Bible clearly says that Jesus died once for our sins. Catholicism says that Jesus is perpetually sacrificed. He never gets off the cross in Catholicism. And this golden cup is what's used in by the priest in every Catholic church, by the Pope in every Catholic Mass. This is Semiramis, and it represents this false paganistic Catholicism. And again, I'm not talking about the Catholic people. I don't have any problem with Catholic people. I know they're sincere and doing their best. My problem is with the Catholic hierarchy. So this represents the hierarchy of Catholicism, which still rules the world to this day. I went over this before in those previous episodes. Please go to those in order to get the full story. Okay, verse 5. And on her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. I'm sorry, let me go back before we get to that. Back to verse 4. It says, the cup was full of abominations and the filthiness for fornications. That's some graphic stuff there. This cup is full of filthiness of fornication. I don't even want to think about what that might actually be. What is fornication? And what about fornication could fill a cup with liquid? Well, you think whatever the liquid that comes out of illicit sexual activity. I'll let you use your vivid imagination for that. But this is a family show, so I'm not going to go into that, but that's pretty freaking disgusting. Okay, back to verse 5, excuse me. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abomination of the earth. Mystery. What is mystery here? Mystery is not the way we use the term mystery in English. A mystery in our English culture is, you have a puzzle and it's solved. You have a mystery and mystery is solved. That's not what it means in the Greek culture in which John is writing. Mystery is a Greek word, mysterion. It means something that was hidden before, but is now revealed for the first time. So the first time this is being revealed. This mystery of what? Babylon the Great. So this ties back to Babel and to that same area in what current day Iraq, but it's the area where the Tower of Babel was built. It's where Nebuchadnezzar ruled. So it's Babylon the Great. So this is the ultimate expression of Babylon, the mother of harlots. We talked about what a harlot is before. A harlot, a whore, a prostitute is someone who, in spiritual means, is someone who is selling their spiritual intimacy for material wealth. This is the beginning, the mother of it, the source of it. Who is the first harlot? Who is the first person who used spiritual intimacy, false worship, in order to get stuff? Semiramis. She initiated organized religion. The mother of harlots is Semiramis. It started at Babel. And keep going. The abomination of the earth. What is an abomination? An abomination is idol worship, worshiping something that is not God. How do we know that? Because when we look at the Old Testament, Israel is accused of committing abominations, and every time it's accused of being abominations, you again go to Bible Gateway and put the word abomination in and do a word search. It's always false worship. It's always worshiping idols. So that's what that is. She is the mother of idol worship. She is the mother of selling your spiritual intimacy in order to get stuff, to get material goods. It is Semiramis. Verse 6. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. This, again, very graphic. The blood of the saints. False religions always hate God's true saints. And it says she's drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So this false religion has shed the blood of saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. This shows this is all the New Testament. Now, the martyrs of Jesus obviously are the New Testament, because you can't be a martyr of Jesus until Jesus came, which again happened in the first century and ongoing. So these false religions, call them what you will, be it the false religion of the Egyptians or the Babylonians or the Persians or the Greeks or the Romans or the Islam, all those, what do? They hate Christianity and they hate the Jews. The blood of the saints. Before Christianity, the Israelites were called the saints. Saints are the holy ones. They are the called set apart ones. Saints equal Israel. The Egyptians slaughtered Israel. And we saw that in Exodus, where they slaughtered the firstborn. They put the Israelites into slavery. All of these false religions and all these false governments of the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Greeks and the Persians and the Romans, they killed the followers of Jehovah, of the God of the Bible. And then the New Testament and and ongoing. They slaughtered the followers of Jesus. They persecuted the Christians for centuries, and they still do to this day. We don't experience that so much in the Western world because, they can't do it. There are too many Christians, or at least people who claim to be Christians, for them to get away with it. But you go to areas where Christianity is not the dominant religion, like China, like Indonesia, like the Middle East, like areas in Africa and in South America, Christians are being slaughtered because all those areas have the false religion of Catholicism and Islam and just various other false religions, and they love killing Christians. They are all anti-Christian. I've admitted to being a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And, as far as like these folks like the Illuminati and all these other mystics and whatnot. And I have some other friends who are also conspiracy theorists, but they all happen to be atheists. And they always ask me, well, why do you believe in Christianity? Isn't Christianity just another tool of the Illuminati to suppress people? And I tell them, here's my reason for not buying into that. And here's why you should buy into it. Because all of these Illuminati types, all of these secret societies, they have one thing in common. They all hate Christians. The Illuminati hates Christians. The Council of Foreign Relations hates Christians. Islam hates Christians. Chinese communists hate Christians. All of these, whoever you think runs the world, one thing they have in common is that they all hate Christianity. Why is that? Even like the so-called alien thing happening, we talked about this in the past. These folks who believe in, the aliens are true saviors, whatever. What do the aliens come down to say? Well, the Bible is wrong, Christianity is wrong. Seriously, they apparently travel billions of light years to tell us that the Bible's wrong. Not the Quran, not the Veda, not Buddhism. They only hate Christianity. Why? Because they're from the same source, the same satanic Luciferian source. They all hate Christians. So my proof point of why Christianity is real is because all of the evil in the world hates Christianity. Nobody hates Buddha. Nobody hates nobody hates Hinduism. Nobody even hates Islam. We have liberals in this country, so-called liberals, progressives, secularists. They go out of their way to support Islam, even though Islam, if you look at it, is against all the things these progressives claimed to be for, like women's rights and gay rights. Islam is not for women's rights. If you're in Islam, women have to dress basically head to toe and just have their eyes uncovered. These Islamic nations kill homosexuals. Yet the left and the progressives support Islam, but they hate Christians. They all hate Christianity. They all want to slaughter Christianity, the martyrs of Jesus, because this is all a part of these same false religions. Okay, let's keep going. I'm getting a little bit off track here, but let's get back to it. So this woman is not just drinking the blood she doesn't shed the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. She's drunk with it. She revels in it. She enjoys it. This is some sick satanic stuff. It's not just that you are shedding the blood of Christians, but you are drunk with it. You are intoxicated by all the blood you're shedding of the people of God, meaning that you hate God. You're anti-God. And John said when he saw her, he wondered with great admiration, or he marveled. At the end of this session, I'm going to give you my opinion on why John marveled, why he was amazed by her. And it's going to be, it's interesting. Before we get to that, let's keep going. Verse 7, and the angel said to me, to John, why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, a lot of this I'm going to fly through because we already covered it. The beast you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, is not, and yet is. That is a description of Nimrod. Nimrod became a Nephilim. Because he was a Nephilim, he was supernatural. He died, but because he was not a human being, he was put into the bottomless pit. He existed before. He is not at the time of John, because he was in the bottomless pit, and yet he still exists. And here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Those 7 mountains represent spiritual authority. Those 7 mountains are the 7 world empires. We talked about them before. The 7 world empires are Babel, Egypt, Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, Medo-Persia, and Greece, Rome, and then the Antichrist Empire. 5 had fallen. At the time of John, 5 were gone. Babel was gone. Egypt had fallen. Babylon had fallen. Medo-Persia and Greece were fallen. 1 is, and that was Rome during the time of John. The other is not yet come, which is, the Antichrist Empire of the tribulation. And when he comes, he must continue a short time, 7 years. And the beast that you saw is, and the beast that you saw that was, is not, and yet is. That's Nimrod. He is the 8th and is of the 7th, the source of the 7. It goes to perdition. Nimrod is the 8th, not the 8th head, because there's only 7 heads. 8th, he's the beast itself. He is the 8th. You'll see here on the description. Here in these, I'm on the screen now. He is the 8th. He's the beast itself and is of, or the source of the other 7. Nimrod and Babel are the source of the other world empires. All world empires came from Nimrod. He was the first. He is the source of all the others. Nimrod had the most perfect world empire to date, secular world empire, and he will go into perdition. Okay, verse 12. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but will receive power as kings went out with the beast. So these 7 horns are 7 spiritual authorities that are with Satan, who don't have a kingdom yet, but they will get that kingdom shortly with the beast, and they will give their mind, their will over to this empire. And yes, we've talked about that before. You can go back to the previous episodes to go into that. Verse 14. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and Kings of kings. And they that with him are called and chosen and faithful. Verse 14 is about Armageddon, which we will talk about down the road a bit after we get past the bowls of wrath. That their whole purpose is to try to defeat Jesus, but of course Jesus will win, and we'll talk about that more in Armageddon, so I'm not going to go into that now. This is just basically an overview of their career. They're going to lose. Verse 15, and he said to me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So let's go back to that depiction of the woman riding the beast. And so the woman is riding the beast, and she sits on many waters. So she has had authority over people, nations, and tongues. As I said before, these mystics, these priests of Semiramis, have had authority over the world since day one and still to this day. We always see these mystics at court, these folks who are always in the background, who have more power than those who claim to be kings or prime ministers or presidents or Caesars or whatever you call them. The people behind the scenes, these priests always have the power. We see it first in Egypt. Remember the story of the Exodus, where Pharaoh was there, and Moses said, let my people go, or they threw his staff down and it became a serpent. And what happened? There were mystics at court, Janus and Jambres. We see their names. Paul gives us their names, and they were able to do the same thing. They were able to throw their staffs down and they became serpents. But of course, Moses' staff ate the other staffs, the other serpents, showing that Jehovah of the Bible is superior. But every king always has these mystics at court. Look here to the United States. We have our president. Currently is Biden, who's senile, but that's not neither here nor there. And we have, before him, we had Trump, and then, the Bushes and the Clintons and Reagan and so forth and so on. And they come and go every 4 years or 8 years. They get reelected. But who do you always find in the background? You have these mystics, these people in these societies. You have Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger has been in Washington since the 70s. That's 50 years. No one's ever elected Henry Kissinger to anything. Why is he around? Why does he still have influence? He's a mystic. All these other people, Donald Rumsfeld during the second Bush administration, Dick Cheney, Valerie Jarrett. You have all of these folks, these people in cabinet positions who are always in the background. They never go away. They never get elected. They are never taken out. They are just always around the presidency, no matter what happens. And every country has the same thing. They have these mystics who are part of these secret organizations like the Skull and Bones and the Skull and Key and the Rhodes Scholars and all these different societies and the Bilderberger groups and the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations. All these folks make up the CIA and the NSA and all these different cabinet groups. These folks never leave Washington. These are the mystics. They are the ones that are always in control. they outlast any president or prime minister or king. These are the true people in power, and they are all satanic Luciferians. And I'm not to get too conspiratorial, because that's not what this podcast and these videos are about. But you look at people like John Podesta, and the Hillary Clinton emails where he was doing these things called spirit cooking, which is the Luciferian ceremony with this woman Marina Abramovich, where they're doing faux cannibalism and all this kind of stuff. They're all Luciferians. They're all doing these rituals behind closed doors, and they have the real power. They're always the satanic Luciferian people at court of all leaders from the beginning, starting with Semiramis and her priests and priestesses during the time of Babel with Nimrod, through the time of the Egyptians with Janus and Jambres, to Babylon, where his Chaldeans were trying to interpret his dream, which they couldn't, and Daniel ended up doing it. Every single place you have had rulerships of kings and princes and monarchs and so forth and so on, you always have mystics, priests and priestesses at court who are really running things. So because of that, the harlot, has always sat on many waters. She has been over all the people of the earth. Okay, verse 16. And the 10 horns which you saw, these final 10 rulers, these shall hate the whore, and make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Why does this happen? The reason that these kings and these rulers have always had the mystics at court is because they've helped them. Religion has always helped the people who are in power stay in power. Why? Because the religious people claim that they have divine rulership, that they are able to commune with the gods. And so it's been a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. The kings rule with force through their armies and whatnot. The mystics, they rule through spiritual means. They have access to the minds of men and women, and they use things like marketing and things like subliminal messaging and all kinds of mental, psychological, and religious methodology in order to keep people subjected. So there's that symbiotic relationship that the kings use the force, not the force, not like Star Wars, the force. They use the force of arms to keep people in line. The mystics use psychological means to keep people in line. The kings protect the mystics, and the mystics keep the kings in power. It's been a great relationship, but that's all going to end. Why is it going to end? Because when we get to the midpoint of the tribulation, Satan no longer needs the mystics. Keep in mind that Satan does not, at the moment, Satan doesn't care what religion you choose as long as you don't choose Christianity. Satan doesn't care if you're a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist or a pagan or a witch or a wizard. He doesn't care as long as you're not a Christian. Doesn't matter. He just wants you away from God. He doesn't care what you worship. However, that's going to change at the midpoint of the tribulation. At the midpoint of the tribulation, you will be forced to worship the Antichrist. There will only be one religion that the powers of this earth will tolerate, and that one religion is worship of the Antichrist and the dragon. It says that in Revelation chapter 13. People will worship the beast, the Antichrist, and will worship the dragon who gave power to the beast, and the false prophet will facilitate it. That is it. Now, the irony actually is that at the time of the 3.5 year point, there won't be any more atheists. I always get a hard time from atheists. They like to comment and tell me how wrong and crazy I am. You know what, atheists? Your days are numbered. You're headed for extinction. When the Antichrist is on the throne, he commits abomination of desolation. There will only be 3 groups of people on earth. There will be people who worship the Antichrist, which will be the vast majority, because they will have to either take his mark or otherwise won't be able to buy or sell. They'll be killed. There will be the remnant of Christians who have decided that Jesus is who they want to worship, and where they want to be, and they will be living a very difficult life because they'll be locked out of the economic system. They'll just be living as best they can until his second coming. And then there will also be Jews who are not Christians but realize that the Antichrist has deceived them, and they still believe in Judaism, but they haven't accepted the Antichrist. That's all. There will be no atheists. Everyone will be worshiping a faith, either the faith of the Antichrist, the faith in Jesus, or faith in Judaism. That's it. There will be no other, nothing else. No more atheists. Atheists will be gone. There will be no one left who does not believe in the supernatural. But that means that all the other religions have to go. Why? Because yes, Christians or Judaism, and then there's the Antichrist and nothing else. That means Islam's got to go. Hinduism's got to go. Buddhism's got to go. Zoroastrianism's got to go. Paganism's got to go. All of them. All these false religions that woman who's riding the beast is represented, they have got to go, because Satan does no longer wants them to worship any other false god, just him and his Antichrist. So those 10 horns, which will have there will be 10 spiritual authorities who are Satan's minions. They're going to hate the whore. What does hate mean? Hate, keep in mind, this is the Greek language. Hate is meseo. Meseo does not mean dislike. Meseo means to love less. It says that they will love the whore less than the other religions. They won't hate the other religions. They've been using them for centuries, for millennia. But they will love these other religions less than they love the Antichrist religion. So they will make her desolate and naked, meaning they will take all of her riches. And by all the riches, I mean the billions, the trillions of dollars that these false religions have gained over the millennia. When my wife and I were in Italy a few years ago, we saw the vast wealth of the Catholic Church. It is ridiculous that how much that just was on display. Gold, I mean, just the entire Sistine Chapel and the Vatican just inlaid with billions of dollars in gold and priceless artwork. And that's just what we could see. That doesn't include all the stuff that's in the Vatican libraries and hidden away in vaults that we don't have access to. I mean, that's always funny when the Catholic Church claims poverty. If the Catholic Church just sold 10% of what it has, kept 90%, sold 10%, they could feed every starving man, woman, and child on the earth. But they don't do it because they're not Christian. They are pagans. But anyway, that's a vast amount of, it's all going to be gone. They're going to take it all, and it's going to go to the Antichrist. Islam is gone. You forget Islam. The Mecca and Medina, done. All of those are going to go. They are going to make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. All of the wealth of these false religions are going to be gone. All of the assets, all the spiritual assets of these religions are going to be gone. It says in verse 17, for God has put it in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdoms to the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. That means that these 10 horns, these 10 spiritual authorities, many of them are going to be over these false religions. In, again, Islam and China, Shintoism and Confucianism, all the spiritual authorities of these areas all over the world are going to reject their ancestral religions and give all their power to the beast. And it's going to be devastating. We're going to find out in the next episode when we look at chapter 18, which goes over the material wealth that vividly goes over the material wealth that will be lost. But let's just stick with the spiritual. All of that spiritual authority of all of these religions, all of these mystics that have plagued the earth since the time of Babel, they're going to be wiped away. And God is judging them indirectly. That's the irony. God isn't just directly judging them. He's judging them indirectly through the same spiritual authorities that they had given themselves over to since the beginning of time. Those same spiritual authorities, those same evil Elohim, those same fallen angels are now going to turn on them. They're going to turn on the woman. They're going to turn on false religion and say, we're done with you now. We don't need you anymore. All you mystics that have been the priests and the shamans and the soothsayers and the high priests, you're gone. We don't need you. You're destitute. You're desolate. It's going to burn them and make them naked. All these folks who have just been living lasciviously with the harlot for all these years, who are living in mansions and flying on yachts and private jets, they're going to tell you have no choice now. You have to give all that up and give it over to the Antichrist. all of religion is finally going to be judged. So this system that has ruled over men and for millennia and have subjected human beings to their will, in 1 hour, we'll see actually in the next chapter, instantly they're going to all go to poverty, from riches to poverty overnight. It'll be devastating, but it's well deserved because they deserve it. They've been doing this damage for all this time, and now it's all going to go away. And last verse 18, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. What is this great city? We're going to get more into detail on it in the next chapter, but the great city is not just one place. There are those who say, well, the great city is Rome. And technically they're correct, because Rome is the current seat of the false religion and the false religious authority. But it's also, it was in Pergamum in the first century. We saw that in the letter of the church to Pergamum. Before that, it was in Babel. It was in Egypt. The city is just that form of government. That's what it means. It's the great city that rules over the kingdom. There's always one city where the spiritual authority reigns. Again, it's currently Vatican City, but it's been other places. It's been Pergamum. It's been Cairo in Egypt. It's been in Greece. It's been in Babylon. It's been Babel. So it's not just a single place. It's wherever the mystics have gathered. It's wherever their seat of power is. It's that city that reigns over the kings of the earth. Again, currently, it is Vatican City, but it's been other places before. So we're speaking spiritually of a city, of a government, or of an organization. Okay, last thing before we wrap it up. I promised you before that I would give you my opinion as to why John, in verse, 7, the angel asked John, why do you marvel? Why are you amazed by this woman? Why are you in admiration of her? Here's my opinion, and it's an opinion that I got from Dave Hunt, the author who wrote a fantastic book called, not ironically, A Woman Rides the Beast. I highly suggest that you get a hold of it. You can buy it on Amazon. You can actually get it for free if you have Amazon's Audible app, and you can get that same book. You can get it on audio for no extra money. What he says in that is that the woman, John marveled at the woman because he recognized her, but he saw what she really was in this time. Keep in mind that in these visions, women represent faith systems. In Revelation chapter 12, the woman clothed in the sun with the stars and the moon, she represented Israel and in that faith system there. Then you have another faith system called the bride of Christ. The woman who's Christ's bride, that's a faith system. And then you have this woman here who represents false religion. So 3 women all representing religious systems. Why would this amaze John? The theory, which I think has merit, is that when John sees this woman, he recognizes her not necessarily as false religion, but he recognizes her as the true bride of Christ that became a whore, that became a harlot. She looks like that virgin, chaste bride of Christ. But what happens to her? Through Catholicism, this isn't really her. This is Catholicism that looks like her. This is the whore of Babylon who's made herself to look like the bride of Christ, because that's what Catholicism, at its highest point, not the Catholic people, again, I'm talking about Catholic hierarchy, they claim to be the true bride of Christ. They claim to be Christianity, but when you look at her, she is decked in purple and gold. She has all these jewels on her. She is drunk with the blood of the saints, but she casts herself as the virgin, chaste, modest bride of Christ. So John looked at her and said, wait a minute, that looks like the bride of Christ. Why is she dressed like a whore? Why is she decked out in all this raiment? Why is she drunk with the blood of the saints? He's amazed because this woman is looking like the bride of Christ, the sanctified, chaste, virginal bride of Christ, but she is made up like a whore. Well, I think that's why he's amazed, because he says that she looks like the bride of Christ, but she actually is the harlot of Babylon. So that's put forth by Dave Hunt, and I agree with it. I think it's very provocative. And that's why John is amazed, because he sees the bride of Christ, or a false version of the bride of Christ, transformed into this harlot, and he's amazed by it. But the angel has to set him straight and tell him, no, this is not the true bride of Christ. This is actually the harlot. She's just masquerading as the bride of Christ, which is what the Catholic Church claims to be. All right, here we are at an hour. This went longer than I thought it would. Sorry about that. So let's wrap it up. In the next episode, we will go over Revelation chapter 18. It'll be shorter because half of it is just a celebration of this, of a false religion finally being dethroned, of the whore finally being knocked off of her pedestal. And then the last part just gives, the second half of chapter 18 really goes into detail of the material and commercial wasteland that is left in the wake of her final judgment. So, thank you for listening and watching. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to Faith by Reason by going into the left navigation area on faithbyreason.net and putting in your email address. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on whatever channel you happen to be listening to, the blog and podcast. I will appreciate it. And I will talk to you next time when we talk about the fall of commercial Babylon and all of the riches that are lost when the whore is finally judged, and the celebration among the saints of Jesus and the saints of God when this evil system is finally brought to heel. And I'll talk to you next time.